REST API, building a REST API in C Sharp just from scratch. I haven't set up anything and I am just trying now. And so if I do mistakes on the way, you would also see how I can solve it. Okay. So we start with create a new project. And actually I want to go with C Sharp, Windows and web. Yeah, that's fine. And let's search for ASP.NET. There it is. Okay, so but we don't want ASP.NET Core. We want to build with using .NET framework, which is something like 4.8 at this time. So we have we are just going to build web API, MVC and web API selected by default. We are not going to set up any authentication or nor we are not going to configure for HTTPS at this moment. And let's create it. It always takes a lot of time. Okay, so the base project is ready, and since this is basically is MVC project, it by default creates a MVC web page for us, but we are not interested in it. If we check in controllers, there are two controllers. One is home controller, and home controller inherits from the controller, and this is not the one we are going to use. Since we are dealing with web API, we need the values controller here. And if you check that one, it inherits from API control. That is what we need, okay? So to start with, for getting data from VFP, we would need some kind of model class, okay? Or let's bypass this model thing for now. Uh, we are just going to test the get part. So for that reason, we don't even need a model. Okay, and here a default get created for us under API values root says it is returning an enumerable string. It means that it is returning a series of string. Okay, and here it does return a string array that contains value 1 and value 2. Okay, but we are going to return some other data from VFP here, so we are just going to replace this for ourselves for sampling. So this is our samples data path. We are connecting there. Actually, we can even make it simpler. Just for sampling, we are returning all the customer data. Okay. We will just return a data table instead. And here we have another get API. This time it says API values, and here it has a sample ID. And we could do the same, but instead of an ID like an integer, we would use an ID something like Berks from customer. So in our case, it is string, and let's just copy this one. When it is VFP, actually precisely when it is VFP or another OLEDB connection, then the parameters are defined by their position rather than their name. This customer ID as a name here is just for the developer. Otherwise, it is just binding to first question mark in the query. Okay, and its DB type is string. And since we have just one module here, let's put it the best ID. We know in customer DB all the IDs are in uppercase. and we return again a data table. Normally we would create a model, so we could just return a single customer object as a row. Okay, we just created two get methods, and both of them are under API values, and one of them would get the ID. Let's run this one and check how it works. Since it is just an get call, okay, there we go. I don't know what it gave an error for the first time. Let's go to API values, and we should see the data table from, yeah, you see the data comes in as an XML here, all the customer data. And let's try with an something like bonap. Okay, we get the bonap, or let's say just some C. We get it. Okay, that's all, folks. For a starter, this is how a REST API in CSharp.NET framework works. If you go back to controller, actually these are two get methods. You have also post, put, delete that you can define as you like. Okay, and maybe you are curious about that, if you need to always use API values and need to use this class or not. Actually, you don't. You just create your own class, and whatever you want to name it. For example, if we wanted to name it explicitly as customer, such as API customer, so we could just say customer here. Okay, and we would still inherit it from the API controller. Let's try. As far as I know, this part doesn't need that name to be changed in routing. It is called routing, by the way. Okay, still now it is customer, API customer. And even if you want to change the you may ask, where does this API is coming from? It is actually coming from here. If you open app start and check the route config, you see, oh, pardon me, this is route configuration is for the MVC web API config. You see it says API here. That is why it takes the API part from here, and the customer or values from the controller's name, whatever the controller. It is something like values controller or customer controller or whatever. You just append controller to it. Okay, you might change here. For example, let's make it this VFP. Okay, so our new routing pattern is VFP controller, and ID is optional. As you can see, it says route parameter is optional ID, and you can change the routing as you like here. Now if we start this one, now the routing has been changed to VFP let's try with API as we did before. It should return a server error. That's fine, just like we wanted it to. And under VFP we get it. Okay, and one more thing before we end it. If you just navigate to default index page that it creates, here you see API. If you click on that, it gives you existing API paths. Okay, this is the help file. Okay, and we didn't provide any documentation, so it doesn't show any documentation. Okay, so when you click there, we see it doesn't get any URI parameters or body parameters. As a response, it is returning a data table. Okay, so this is it. We don't have any sample actually. Okay, thanks folks.